Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first in our three-part webinar series that is part of the 20th anniversary celebration of our Champions in Action program. My name is Caitlin Sprong. I'm our Director of Community Engagement at Citizens, and I'll help produce the event today. As you all know, as past winners, the Champions in Action program celebrates and recognizes nonprofit organizations who are making a real difference in their communities. For 20 years, Citizens has been partnering with media outlets in key markets to shine a spotlight on organizations like yours who are addressing social change and really making an impact. So as we celebrate this milestone anniversary, we have a lot of plans underway. Our media partners are highlighting this program and past winners on air, in print, and more over the course of the next few months. So do be on the lookout in your market. And you'll soon be seeing a great highlight video, testimonials, and more on our social media channels. We encourage you to leverage this milestone for yourself and engage in that social conversation for your own visibility and highlighting your past win. So you'll be hearing more from us with tools and sample posts in the coming days. Finally, we've developed this three-part webinar series focused on the topics that you told us that you'd like to hear about. Today's session kicks off our series and will be focused on developing a strong HR nonprofit strategy. We heard loud and clear that this was an area that you'd all love more insight on and best practices in. So I'm excited that the group we've convened today are some experts here at Citizens who will be able to share tips, tricks, insight on a few key topics, including retention, professional development, compensation, rewards, structure, succession planning, DE&I, much more. So before I introduce and turn it over to our moderator, though, we're going to start with a brief exercise just to get to know what's on your mind. So we'll pull up a whiteboard. And if you head to the left of your screen, there's an icon that has a lowercase and an uppercase T. That's the text icon. And you can click on that and draw right on the whiteboard. But we'd love to hear from you when you hear HR, what comes to mind? What are the buzzwords? What are the terms? What phrases, what work comes to mind when you hear human resources? You're all heading to the left-hand side. You should see that text icon. Or you can use the chat. Feel free to go ahead and drop anything in the chat. Okay, whiteboard might not be working. So why don't we head to the chat? Folks, if you want to go ahead and use the chat function on what comes to mind when you think HR. We'll take a look at what comes up in the chat. Oh, a couple folks got it working. I'm seeing compliance, help, recruitment, policy, right? People, hiring, compensation, benefits, labor laws, DE&I, employee review and compensation, recruitment, talent development. All right. More of a focus on the human, labor laws, policies, employees, retaining good people, employee evaluations. All right. All right. So panelists, you've got quite a slew of words to get you set up here. So I want to just pause before we can minimize the whiteboard and introduce our moderator today. Our moderator is Yvette Vargas. Yvette is the head of development for Citizens. She's been with the company since 2012. And Yvette leads the integrated development strategy that includes talent management, leadership development, organizational development, education, training, DE&I, the future of work, and much more. So she's a real expert in our HR space. And I will kick it over to Yvette to introduce the panelists and remind folks that you're muted for now, but we will make plenty of time for Q&A. So feel free to keep popping that into the chat and we'll get to Q&A at the end. But Yvette, over to you for our panel.
Thank you, Caitlin. Super honored to be here with my colleagues here who are also experts in their own right and have been really great partners to me. Let me just start by introducing the panelists. First, I'll start with Kristen McMillan, who's the head of TA Strategy and Services. And today she'll be focusing on many topics, but in particular, recruiting strategies and retention strategies. And then we have Joe Goes, who's the head of shared services, and he'll be speaking or focusing on compensation and rewards, and perhaps can lean into other kinds of services that are provided by his area. And then finally, we have Sarah Hunter, who's the head of employee relations, and she'll be leaning into retention, development, and succession planning mechanisms. So with that, we're just going to jump in. And I'll start out by saying that, as all of you know, a company is only really as good as its people. And the HR function, in particular, over the last several years, has become increasingly much more of a critical function in whatever company you're in, because we're not only the stewards of the culture, but we're also responsible for ensuring the health and the quality of its people, because, as I said, it's directly tied to the performance of the organization. So today, hopefully, you'll get, as Caitlin said, some tips and some tools around how to navigate some of the challenges that we are facing as HR professionals in this very complex and uncertain times. But so let me start out. First question I'll direct to Kristen. And this really is something that is very actually prevalent right now. According to the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, over 47 million Americans have voluntarily quit their jobs in 2021. And this is an exit from the workforce. It's in some cases a reshuffle, but companies are losing people. So how can the nonprofit sector actually recruit and retain its top talent in this increasingly complex and uncertain economic and hiring environment?
Thanks for the question, Yvette. And it's no coincidence that HR, the first word in that is human, right? And many of you hit on that. The pandemic had accelerated many changes that were already underway in the talent market that caused people to really reevaluate what's important to them and their careers and their families and their lives, both personally and professionally. And that led to many people changing careers, as Yvette said. And over the past couple of years, this year in particular, what candidates are looking for has really shifted. It used to be people wanted compensation and a career. And now people are wanting much more than that. They're wanting to be seen as a whole person, both personally and professionally. They want to feel supported inside and outside of work. And they want to work with organizations that share their values. They want to feel supported. They want to have mental health benefits, like Karen said. They want to have wellness support. They also want flexibility and to work with companies and organizations that support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's really fortunate, I think, for many nonprofits that you're able to hit on some of the core things of what candidates want, particularly that shared purpose. It's an opportunity for you to really hit home where these people can make an impact, both in your organization and how they can feel like they're advancing themselves professionally. And it could start with really small changes, like but don't call it a job posting or a job when you're interviewing with somebody. Talk about a calling, talk about making an impact, to really start to pull on people's heartstrings and help them see how they can make a difference in your organization. And many people will choose lower compensation in order to be able to feel like they're making that difference and that impact. Another thing you can think about is when you are posting open opportunities or looking for talent, look at unconventional talent pools. You know, a lot of people are going for the same types of people. How can you differentiate where you're looking? One of my favorite things is, it sounds silly, but it's called ABC. Always be recruiting is what I call it. So when you go out to a restaurant and you hear somebody a waitress talking about being really passionate about something, think about if you can translate that passion from what she's doing now into your organization and just open up the line of conversation. You never know where it's going to lead you. Other things you can think about in terms of unconventional talent pools are asking your volunteers for referrals. Are there people that they know that might be looking for a new opportunity? Do you have an opportunity to convert current or former volunteers into full-time FTE or even part-time FTE? Can you partner with local high schools and have seniors work on their senior projects as part of to deliver a financial forecast or a social media campaign that might help your business really get visibility? Other things you can think about too are really looking at degree requirements. You know, the number of people across the country that are no longer pursuing a bachelor's degree. If you don't have to put a bachelor's degree in your job description, don't. It will allow you to attract a completely different pool of people with very different skill sets than you might have otherwise thought about. And it just opens up your talent pool to people from a diverse set of backgrounds. So it's kind of long event, but hopefully that helps.
That's terrific. And if I reflect on, some of the offerings, the things that people are actually looking for, it kind of describes a value proposition, right? That companies need to design in order to attract and retain. And one of those elements that is getting increasingly more important is this notion of professional development. And it's not only a retention tool, it's also an attraction tool. And we also know that 94% of employees would stay longer in an organization if they felt that they were getting learning and development opportunities. So starting with you, since you still have the mic here, Kristen, what are some of the programs or the professional development approaches you would recommend to attract and retain talent going forward? And maybe you can think about what are some of those low cost, no cost kinds of experiences. And then I'll love to hear from Joe and Sarah on that topic as well.
All right, thank you for the question. I think the majority of learning and development actually happens on the job. You can absolutely take a class online or at a local university. You can listen to podcasts, you can read, but when you have the opportunity to maybe job shadow somebody or just learn a new skill from another coworker, that's where you're going to absorb all of that change and really start to expand your skill sets so you can work in different areas. In terms of low cost, no cost options, job shadowing, I think, is probably one of my favorites. It has allowed me personally to learn a number of new skills and help me get to where I am. And also mentorships. Encourage folks that are that are either volunteering with you or working with you full time to find somebody that they really admire, whether it's in a corporate setting or a nonprofit setting, who can help mentor them in their career. And then they can bring those learnings back to your organization, obviously, and help you advance. A couple of other things I wanted to point out, some of you may know, but LinkedIn is one of the primary social media platforms for professionals in the world. And they do offer their nonprofits a 50% discount on core products like their talent, learning, and fundraising. So if you were able to do something like that, you would get a discount and allow your staff to get access to thousands and thousands of LinkedIn premium trainings. And then also, if any of you are veterans or if you employ veterans, veterans are offered a 1-year LinkedIn premium subscription at no cost, which is a $350 savings. So feel free to take advantage of those in addition to some of the free options I mentioned earlier.
Terrific, Kristen. Thank you. Joe and Sarah, do you have any other additions to the list that Kristen has already identified?
Yeah, thanks, Yvette. Kristen, that was a great list. I'm just going to add one that's very easy to do and practical. And I know I've used it in my own, both as the person who's being asked the question and also the person asking the question, but really just checking in with your team on a periodic basis and asking them what's interesting to you. What else would you like to do here? What are you not getting an opportunity to do that I could help facilitate? And hand in hand with that really goes creating what I would call sort of a safe space to share what they are really thinking, right? Because for retention and also for succession planning, you want your team to feel like they can share what their thoughts and their desires are in their professional space. And there may be some things that even from their personal life, they want to do more, but they're worried about the impact on, childcare or, a parent that they're taking care of, right? Enable them to share what they'd like and what their concerns are. It's very easy to do that. I think it allows people to feel like you truly care about them. And then if you can have some proof points, whether it's with that person or somebody else on the team, just to show, hey, we had a conversation that this person really had an interest in payroll. And so they left my team and they went to Joe's team. And this is a real example, right? It didn't happen overnight. It took about 8 to 10 months, but I knew that this person liked payroll, and so we made that happen for them. And that's something that any of you can do on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis with your team, just to understand where they're at.
Love that, Sarah. So you actually hit on a couple of things, right? So it's like just check in terms of aspirations, and then broker a level of mobility across the organization to give people some new experiences. Joe, it sounds like you had some additions as well.
Yeah, no, all great points, and a lot of the things that would, first come to my mind. I think in terms of professional development, I would certainly put that in as part of the value proposition. And if you want to cultivate loyalty in employees, then you go beyond giving them a paycheck, and providing them the professional development plan is going to give them a chance for continuous learning and further development of their skills, and that has real value.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Terrific. So, Sarah, let me come back to you. In your role, I know that you spend a lot of time talking to employees about how they're feeling and focus in on working with managers to retain the talent and manage their performance. We have been seeing historically high rates of turnover, as we mentioned earlier. And certainly in the nonprofit organization, Shortterm stated that it was at 19%, which is higher than the industry rate at 12%. And so what are your thoughts about how a nonprofit can ensure that they're adequately preparing for changes that might be happening in their organization? Employees leaving, changing of organizational structures. What are your thoughts around that? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so I think when you're taking stock of your team and your organization and your purpose, right? What you are really doing is taking inventory, right? What are my objectives for the year? What are the things that we want to be focused on or achieve in the next 3 years, 5 years, whatever your strategic plan is that you're working on? And a critical part of that, as Yvette, noted at the top of our time with you, is the people. So I would recommend that you have a regular time during the year, or maybe a couple of times a year, where you just sit, whether you do this on your own or you do it with your board or others in key roles at your organization, but really think about what are the key roles that we have, and that I mean role, not person, but what are the jobs that we have here that are really critical? What are the skill sets that we need today and tomorrow to be successful in those roles, and help us achieve the vision and the mission of this organization? And then really think about how are you preparing your people or other staff to help with that, right? And there's a quick way to think about it of, are you going to build, buy, or borrow, right? So you can build your existing team by giving them development opportunities, whether that's job shadowing or stretch assignments or rotating them into different roles so that you are developing a broader skill set for the person and also for the organization, so you don't have a single point of failure on something that's really critical for you. You can borrow someone by, in the case of nonprofits, maybe that's more your volunteer base, you're borrowing that person, or you can buy, it's a new hire. So I think it's a combination really of knowing what you need, what's most important for you from a skill set perspective, then looking first to your existing team, pipelining, doing some kind of recruitment or asking for referrals so that you're meeting people who have interest in your organization or in an area that you're looking to develop in, and really continuing on that way. Retention of the people that you have, like, don't sleep on that, right? That's so important. It's always better to develop someone that you have than try to go out and find someone new, I think, in almost every case. And yes, compensation is important, right? People do need to pay their bills. But there's so much more to providing a great place to work, whether that's workplace flexibility, whether it is development opportunities, really understanding and, believing in the mission of the organization. So there's a lot for you to tap into that goes beyond dollars. But knowing how your people want to be utilized and how they want to grow is where I would start with that.
Yeah, it's terrific. So basically, Sarah, what you have described is really the activities under talent management, right? And build, buy, borrow, they don't happen, one at a time. Often they happen all at the same time. And one of the things to consider when you're deciding whether you build, buy, or borrow is to really understand what your talent management goals are, right? And do you have to accelerate growth as an example? If you are growing at a very fast pace, you may want to consider buying and borrowing so you can activate your growth agenda faster, because it does take a little more time to develop skills over a period of time. But in most cases, you should be doing all three, just at different levels and different levels of intensity. So I did want to add or ask you, all three of you, the diversity component as you're thinking about building, buying, retaining, building a pipeline for the future. What are your thoughts on diversity? And just to anchor, our conversation, companies are using the term DE&I increasingly more. There are other things that are being added, like the J, which is around social justice. But just to make sure that we have a grounding on what DE&I means, the D is about, who is represented in the workforce. The E is how do we ensure equality and of opportunity amongst our workforce and even our customers. And then inclusion is how does the workforce experience the workplace itself. So with that as a background, how would you all think about what your comments are, in particular in TA or in ER, and some of the work that you all have been doing? You want to give me a few examples of what the nonprofits should be thinking about? Kristen, would you, or Sarah, do you want to start?
Sarah, do you want to go? You had the floor.
Sure, I'm happy to start us off. In my employer relations function, obviously one of the things we do is provide support to colleagues, right, and to managers. So we're available to speak with people if they feel like there's an issue. And so that, I feel like that could be a whole nother topic beyond this call today. But what I would say is, when you're creating that safe space that I referenced before, it does require more than just bringing a diverse person on your team, right? And diverse can mean many different things. I think that for a lot of organizations, diversity, the focus of that has been on diversity either with race or with gender, and particularly in sort of the higher level roles, to increase representation. But it goes beyond that as well. Really diversity of thought and diversity of experiences. Kristen actually made the point earlier about, do you really need to require a bachelor's degree, right? And I've seen job postings out there that, you think you'd read it and nobody would feel qualified to apply, right? So open up the gates a little bit to see what new and interesting talent comes to you. And then the most important piece to me, and this is my personal opinion, so I won't, speak on behalf of citizens, but I think that the inclusion part is the real key, right? So you've got them here. Now, how do you make them feel like they're really part of the team? And how are you demonstrating to them that what they think and ask and say matters, and how do you sort of let them contribute? So that's the hard part, but it's the key part.
Excellent, thank you. And do you have any recommendations as to what companies can do to to create an environment that is much more inclusive? Are there any quick tips that you would provide?
Yeah, I think, having, setting ground rules for conversations, right? Letting that, again, that safe space concept. I don't want to keep going back to it, but just, letting people know that, what are the expectations, to bring concerns forward. If a conversation felt like it went well to one person and not well to the other person, how does that second person kind of share that information, right? Who do they go and talk to? How can you facilitate a conversation between people who maybe got off on the wrong foot or had a bad interaction, right? I think the other thing that you could do, and this is more focused on your team, is just a quick exercise that allows people to share a little bit about themselves. It's always easier to talk with people when you've broken down some of those barriers, right? I'm a big proponent of that on my team, and I really like to encourage us to share as much as we want to, right? And you've got to let each person decide where that needle stops, because some people are not as open book as others, but really kind of getting to know the person will help to create that safe space, and then providing an opportunity and path for people to share when things feel like they're not going well is the other piece of that.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you. How about you, Kristen? Obviously, you spend a lot of time thinking about how to increase the diversity from a recruiting point of view at all levels of the organization. And we still do know that there are underrepresented groups in vital parts of our companies. And so what are some of the tips and the tools that you would use to kind of address this?
Thanks. A couple of things, really. If we think about the job description, again, I'm going to go back to this. If you're looking for somebody to come into your organization, really try to be thoughtful about the qualifications that you're putting into that job. Because women are not apt to apply unless they hit all of the bullet points, whereas men are more apt to apply if they hit about 60% of the qualifications. So the fewer qualifications you can have and really get narrowed down to the ones that are most critical for that person to deliver the responsibilities will help you get a broader set of people, of candidates for your pools. The other thing is, it's really important to, if somebody doesn't hit all of those qualifications, but they have a really strong desire and drive to do more, that means you can upskill them in one area or another. And again, that you would help somebody build their career, but you would also get a wider pool of people to consider. And when somebody comes to interview with you, or when you're marketing your organization online, it's important that people can see themselves in those materials. So if you look at our marketing at Citizens, for example, you will see all different ages, ethnicities, genders. We try to represent all of the different facets of our colleagues so that we can have an organization that looks more like the communities that we serve. So be thoughtful about how you're representing your organization, the photography that you're choosing, because all of that will help, will paint the picture of the type of people that not only your organization will serve, but people who can thrive there as well and feel like they're going to fit in.
Terrific. Thank you. Joe, do you have any additions to that?
Just a short one. So, I mean, we can say it kind of from a legal standpoint, we would look at and be conscious of pay equity issues kind of across as we're designing and administering our compensation plans. But one of the other kind of parts of the value proposition is culture, right? And I think everyone's kind of spoken to that, right? But is it an inviting and safe place for folks to come to and be a part of? That is going to go a long way in terms of attraction and retention, and along with other pieces of that culture is really going to kind of help define for colleagues that pillar of their of the full total reward package. So it certainly does go a long way.
Wonderful, thank you. A couple of points that I would add is, in particular, for organizations who have many managers who are hiring, or considering people internally who might be diverse, as an example, is to make sure that you put in place some programming that helps them understand how bias creeps into the talent decisions that we make, right? Which is a part of managing your talent. So what you may want to consider is to work with an external partner to design some either hiring training and or performance review training so that people understand, how they're writing reviews and how they think about people's performance impacts, the careers of those individuals. So you want to be able to make sure you're removing the bias. And as managers and leaders are considering internal and external candidates, remove the barriers that might creep up through the biases or the mindsets that we all have, right? And unconsciously it creeps up in some of the decisions that we make. So that might be another tip for you all to consider as you're laying out your hiring and recruiting strategies. So
Yvette, can I just add one more? And in that vein, when you're interviewing people, it's really important to use behavioral interviewing. So asking people to share examples of how they delivered something, what the results are, what they learned from it, and then ask each of your candidates those same questions in that same order so that you're evaluating them on an even playing field and hopefully minimizing some of that bias.
That's correct. That's exactly right. Thank you for adding that, Kristen. So Joe, you talked a little bit earlier about compensation, or you made references to compensation. How might, nonprofit organizations who typically have a smaller operating budget deliver meaningful compensation and reward packages while still managing, to stay within their financial goals?
Sure. Thank you. So managing budgets is always going to be challenging, but I think it's important, and we touched on it here already, is to have an established value proposition that you can articulate that showcases your total rewards package. And it highlights both the extrinsic tangible rewards, both monetary and non-monetary, but also the intrinsic rewards that just come from the work itself that you guys all know too well. It is helpful to compare your offerings against the workplace, against the marketplace. It's something we do, and make use of groups like the National Council of Nonprofits. They actually collect salary and benefit information through regular surveys and produce state-specific reports that will allow you to kind of gauge against similar-sized organizations and by jobs and responsibilities. And it's not only helpful in kind of determining reasonable pay versus excessive pay, which is fundamental to keeping the tax exemption status, but it's also great and helpful in determining the allocation, what's the right allocation towards the salary budget in the first place. So just to go over a couple of key points, some of this, you've heard, it's repetitive, but it shows you how with HR, kind of all of these pieces are tied together, and, it's more than just one answer. But components of total rewards include compensation, obviously base salary, and potentially variable pay, which we're seeing more in the non-profit space, but also benefits, traditional benefits package, including health, dental, wellness programs, PTO. The professional development that we touched on earlier goes a long way, and it's a value, you define what kind of organization you are and the willingness. That's a big investment in time from their leadership and senior folks in the organization to bring folks on, and both through career training and mentoring. Overall culture, I think it's one of the things that attracts candidates to a company is great company culture. And that can go a long way. I think the professional development certainly speaks to it, but there are other ways that we can get there. A recognition program that allows for, peer recognition would be great. A relaxed dress code. They don't have to be monetary pieces, but that overall welcomeness to the culture will go a long way. And then, of course, work-life balance is the fifth, and we hear a lot of that. We hear a lot of that now, particularly with hybrid workforce. but it's also just flexible scheduling, right? Could be, I think Kristen talked about looking at considering non-traditional hires, right? And expanding the candidate pool. And there's another place where you can kind of open that benefit out to folks who may not be able to do, a 9 to 5, but could do a 9 to 12, right? Who may only be able to work at the back end of a week because of other commitments. But maintaining that flexibility will certainly open up that candidate pool and allow you to give value back to that colleague or that employee without any monetary expense.
That's terrific. Thank you. So, I want to make sure we have enough time to put questions up, but one last then question for all of you, as you think about some low-hanging fruit that nonprofits can actually put in place in the short term and in the long term, why don't we just do a little bit of a speed moment here and just answer quickly, some short-term things that you think, they can focus on, and then we'll go to the long term. So what are some of those ideas? Kristen, do you want to start?
I think one of the easiest ones to get up off the ground and pretty quickly is that value proposition. Really thinking about those 5 elements I mentioned that are important to candidates, and what do you offer as an organization that would make somebody want to come work with you. And once you can really articulate that, then make sure that your staff can articulate it. I can't think of the word. Others that you work with can articulate it. I think that will help really position you for success in attracting talent.
And then not only can you articulate it, but that you actually are activating it in the culture, right? That you're living it, that your policies and your practices actually enable it, right? And that people can show evidence that it actually is experienced in your culture. So that's a wonderful one. Thank you. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll start with a repeat of just, having those conversations with your team members and understanding what helps fill their cup, right? What do they enjoy about the job they're doing today? What do they not enjoy about the job they're doing today? What else are they interested in? Those are really powerful conversations to have with your team. I think also just, and this is going to sound so basic, but I have to remind myself to do it every once in a while, but just say thank you for something that someone has done, even if it's not extraordinary. Just, someone that's like your rock, that, every time you have an issue, you can count on them to help you with it. Just let them know that you're my rock, and I just really appreciate you being here. Those things are free to do, but very valuable when you're the person that's hearing them. So I would do that.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good one. How about you, Joe? Any short-term piece? And then I'm going to come back to you all for long-term, but for right now, let's short-term.
I'll say for this, events like this, right, kind of participating and attending things like this, as well as these nonprofit groups and membership organizations where you can kind of lean on others who have similar, who are facing similar challenges, right? So, we're stronger as a community, and you can lean on others to solve problems that we have collectively.
Terrific. Any more complex long-term thoughts you have, to share with the audience?
So I have a couple. Oh, sorry. I didn't know if that was open or to Joe. So Joe, you go first.
Go ahead. No, it's okay, Sarah.
Okay. I'm seeing in the chat a question about, what if we don't really have an HR function? So if you don't have this already today, maybe a medium to long-term action item for you is to try and find someone with HR experience to either volunteer or be a part of your board. Then you have the phone a friend when you need it. And I'm someone at Citizens that has been in a few different roles here. I actually joined the organization as a member of our legal team. If you have legal questions, right, having a contact in the legal field is also really helpful. I understand we've got people from all different states with us today, but just to give an example of Massachusetts, There is a volunteer lawyer project that you can get contact information and information about that from the Board of Bar Examiners. They're pretty easy to find on the internet. So, things like that. If you have a need and you just need, some general advice, that's a great place to go as well.
That's terrific. That's exactly right. How about you, Kristen?
I was going to say that the skills that all of us need to do our jobs are going to continue to change. But in spite of that, think about where you want your organization to be in the next 3 to 5 years, and what skills are you going to need, whether it's on your board, on your staff, in order to get you there, and start thinking about how you can cultivate them now so that they're kind of in full bloom when you'll need them down the road.
Excellent. So in essence, what you're really talking about is that you're really putting in a talent plan in the organization, and that really requires you to work with your board, to work with the team, the management team in your organization, to kind of think ahead and think about the future at the same time as thinking about what you need today. So excellent. Thank you so much. How about you, Joe? Long term.
Sure. And along the same vein, but really with a compensation lens, I think when you're looking out 3 to 5 years, change in that space is really it's not something you can fix, right? So if you're underinvested in salaries and benefit programs, it's not something you can fix quickly and turn around. So you have to really think about, what that roadmap is going to be, and how you define, those investments, and they're all going to come, at some expense, right? But making those decisions together with the board, being informed, through surveys, and you have hard data to kind of support that, I think is something beneficial to be that long-term investment.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think we're at 2:45, and I want to make sure people have enough time to ask questions. So now I'll hand it over to you, Caitlin, and thank you to the panelists. This was great conversation.
Absolutely was. So many tips and tricks. I will open it up for Q&A. Folks, feel free to go ahead and put any questions that you have in the chat directly, or feel free to raise your hand. There should be a hand icon, and we can, at the bottom of your screen, and we can unmute you if you'd like to come off mute. So either of those, and we'll get started for the next 15 minutes. We can start with some that have come in from our survey. So to the whole group, how can we create a structure to hire in-house HR support? So I think this bleeds into what we were seeing in the chat too. How do we ensure we are compliant and have good policies if we don't have in-house, right? So if there's no in-house HR, and Sarah, you had a good suggestion on adding to the board, but other thoughts on that piece and how folks would, add an in-house structure right in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in with the thought, and Kristen, you may have some good ideas as well. But I think, if you're looking to bring someone on, whether it's in a volunteer capacity or as an employee, full-time, part-time, right? I think I'll leave the recruiting piece to Kristen, but just thinking about different places to go, right? Especially if it's more volunteer or part-time, are there any universities or in your area that might have an HR program or a general management program with an HR focus that you could reach out to and find out whether there are paid or unpaid internships available, co-op type style? That might be a good sort of pipeline for you to tap into to bring people in. And I think that, just being flexible with what your requirements are for a candidate may also be helpful as well, depending on your needs, obviously, right? You may need someone with a critical skill set in, say, payroll operations, right? And less so in employee relations. But, getting an understanding of, where are some other sources that you could go to beyond the traditional, put it out on LinkedIn and get applicants in that way. But Kristen, any thoughts that you would add to that?
You actually took most of the good ones that I had, Sarah.
Sorry.
The other thing you could think about too is a number of people are not wanting to fully retire right now from positions because for financial reasons, whatever it may be. There could be somebody that you could tap into who maybe has a finance background and could help with balancing payroll sheets, whatever it may be. Think about I would say don't discount the older generation and being able to help fill some of your HR needs.
And the other thing that I would add is if you're looking to transition someone in your organization into a payroll staff, while they're doing their job, you might want to, if they're interested in this, perhaps offer up the opportunity to maybe take a certification program in, for example, Society for Human Resource Management. And there's a whole host of other organizations that will certify and provide credits for learning and getting them at least set up to understand what it is that's important from a payroll point of view, an employee relations, a compliance point of view. So there's a whole host of organizations that will do that if someone in your organization is looking to transition into that role or to prepare for that.
It's a great point. And while we move to the next question, I'll say to each of the panelists, if you have other of those organizations that are coming to mind, go ahead and toss those names into the chat for the group as well, as Kathy just did with the Executive Service Corps, right? So, but this one probably a little bit more geared towards Joe. How would you address COLA payroll increases versus performance increases? Joe, maybe you want to take a first stab at that one?
Yeah, no, I would. So a COLA increase really is, kind of essentially we're going to, across the board, right, increase for cost of living, while the performance is merit-based, right? I would go that way. I think that my strong lean and kind of what we would see is the idea that you're driving and you're returning on that performance is what you're actually rewarding. The one thing I would say there is really just, and I think Sarah mentioned it, is those check-ins, normal conversations, right? Folks should be clear on what the targets are, what they're trying to achieve, and what that good looks like. And if there's clarity there, then I think you'd want to kind of push towards a merit-based increase. I think that's where you're going to have more talent. It's where you're rewarding folks for their contributions and the value that they're adding back to the company. And that differentiation in pay, I think, goes further than a standard COLA.
All right, we've got another question specific to PTO. How would you best implement PTO? How should it be managed? Thinking about outlining it in employee manuals, communications. So any tips, tricks on PTO? Who wants to start with this one?
That's probably for me. So I would say, PTO, PTO as a bucket, right, as an umbrella for time away from the office would encompass things like sick time and personal days, right? So some organizations still have them broken out separately. I think that the trend is really to put it under paid time off. The thing for you to be aware of, to the extent that it applies to you where you're operating, is that there are some states that do require the provision of sick time, which can be covered by the PTO umbrella, but you have to make sure that there are a certain number of hours of sick time that are there for people to use for illness. And then keep in mind that any PTO you do allow people to earn, and we'll talk about the earning piece in just a quick second, but any PTO that you do allow people to earn in most states becomes considered wages that are due to someone. So just considerations for you to be thinking about as you're moving towards that. So most organizations they don't provide all of the PTO up front at the beginning of the say calendar year. You would earn the time in whatever increment you set out in your policy. So if somebody is eligible to have 24 days of PTO, you might accrue 2 days each month. And you would need to write that into your policy of, is it 2 days at the beginning of the month? Is it 2 days at the end of the month? Thinking about things like if they work part-time, do they, earn half of that, right? So kind of how is it prorated for people who might not be working full-time? So the main thing is that you get to design the way that that plan works with your document. And just be mindful that there may be some city or state specific requirements around sick leave. We've seen a big increase in those over the last several years. Joe, you might have some other thoughts from a payroll operations standpoint that I didn't cover.
No, I'm sorry. I don't have anything to add there.
We got another question, so we'll jump to that. How do you gauge salaries in comparison to the market? And how do nonprofit salaries compare to other industries? So like us here. Is the perception that nonprofit employees should take a lesser salary? So probably the group, but Joe, you want to get started?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's certainly, I mean, it's been called a myth that, the benefits package and the line of work makes up for, a competitive compensation package, and that folks are willing to take a less salary because of what they're doing. And there's certainly going to be some truth to that, but it is something that we see a lot of articles written about the truth of that. I think the reality is we're all fighting for the same talent pool, and it's one of those things that you have to consider in how you set up the organization and what dollars you're committing, for the salary budget, because the feeling is, and more articles than not will show that you are going after the same talent pool, and nonprofits have been sort of looked at times as free trading, right? So they're bringing folks in, they're giving them the training, they're giving them the opportunity, and it's a feeder for a for-profit business, which I think you're seeing that trend sort of change as the labor market's becoming tighter, and you have to do more with less, so that the quality of talent becomes a driving factor as well.
Great insight there. All right, we've got one more, and we probably have time for one last one. So folks, as you have access to these experts here, certainly jump in for one or two last questions. Per diem employees, could you sort of define and clarify what that is for folks, as that's a term some folks have heard? Per diem, familiar to any of you? I'm guessing it's pay by the hour.
I am not.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
Yeah, I'm
I've
not clear
heard
on
the
it.
term before. I don't think it's one that we have a lot of experience in at Citizens, paying a daily rate, right? We might think about it as, part of the gig economy, right? Are you hiring someone for a particular task or for a particular day or a particular project? But I don't have any particular expertise in per diem rates, if that's the question.
All right. So folks, if anything else comes to mind, toss it in if we have time. I will go ahead and start to wrap us up. So thank you so much to our panelists. If we could do a virtual round of applause, we would, but thank you so much for your time and expertise here. I heard so much about the employee value proposition, coming out really loudly, and tips around compensation rewards, and such great insight on recruiting. So appreciate all of your time and attention to this topic that has been of interest and on the minds of our partners. So a few closing items. First, we do want to hear from you about how today was. We will be sending out a very short survey via email. We'll also drop it in the chat momentarily. So please do take the time and fill that out to let us know your thoughts on how we can improve these in the future. And a reminder, this was the first in our three-part series. So there are two more great conversation on the books. Thursday, November 17th from 11 to noon will be Managing Nonprofit Finances. We've got a couple experts who will go over tips, tricks, and resources regarding nonprofit financial management, elements critical to 501c3s. And then our last session will be leveraging visibility to raise your organization's profile. This session will cover how to harness the awareness that you gained through the Champions Award, and we'll have citizens experts and representatives from local media partners who will share how to amplify your message, make a good pitch, leverage social media, and more. So that will be a virtual panel on November 30th from 2 to 3. We'll actually be hosting some in-person watch parties in our markets, and that session will be followed with receptions from 3 to 4 to further celebrate our winners. So you'll be seeing some invitations from that again. So a registration link for those last 2 sessions is in the chat. So be sure to take advantage and sign up. But otherwise, again, a huge thank you to our panelists for the time, and thank you to everyone who joined and asked some great questions today. We hope to see you all in the next session. Thanks so much.